basically, if you haven't been paying attention to Marvel Studios lately, they've been sort of struggling since the end of the Infinity Saga. Infinity Saga being, I guess, technically from Edward Norton's Hulk movie until Infinity War Part 2, when that whole chapter closed, and then it was like, all right, we're retiring a bunch of these people, their contracts are over, we're going to try to do something new. And I say if you've been paying attention, because the numbers indicate that not everyone has been paying attention in the way that they had in previous years with the Infinity Saga. So I know there's been a lot of contributing factors like superhero fatigue and things of that nature, but in addition to that, there's been a lot of apparently infighting, indecision. They've struggled a little bit to find their footing after the fact as far as like audiences are concerned, especially. So I think because of that, there's been some maybe lack of clarity, lack of direction, lack of what to do next, because nothing is seeming to click. Personally, I think a lot of what they're doing is working, but I will admit, like, even as somebody who loves Marvel stuff, saw everything, was very, very big into it, went to D23, all that stuff. There's a bunch of the stuff that they've done that I have not seen. And I used to really see everything. There's a bunch of stuff I haven't seen. And it's, in addition to the shows that haven't quite found their audience, there's also things like, all of these movies that are kind of marred by bad visual effects, some of the characters not working, and there's just a bunch of behind the scenes stuff that is not quite working also. And unfortunately, it kind of gives me the vibe of like it's becoming Disney. It's becoming very Disney in the way that like what Disney did with Star Wars. I'm afraid they're kind of going in that direction. We're going to go through this whole article because Variety did a very interesting deep dive into all the stuff that is going incredibly wrong. And it's a very interesting investigation. In addition to, like, I'm sure a lot of this is being negatively impacted by the SAG strike, which is, as of the making of this video, is still ongoing. But the writer's strike isn't. The writer's strike is off. So they're back to writing and waiting for a chance to get back to shooting these things. But I am worried that we're going to see a Star Warsification of Marvel, in that they're going to just keep throwing stuff at the wall, and when stuff doesn't work, then they're going to go back to square one, and then it's going to be years of throwing stuff at the wall, nothing sticking, to the point that it's going to be muddied of what Marvel means in the marketplace, in the way that I believe Star Wars has. It's been muddled, and I think it is not as valuable anymore. So we're going to start deep diving into this. So Crisis at Marvel, Jonathan Majors backup plans, the Marvels reshoots, reviving original vendors, and more issues revealed. So that's obviously a bunch of the stuff right there. We've known about the Jonathan Majors stuff. That is still ongoing. The court case, it didn't get dismissed. This is all based off of assault charges. They tried to get it dismissed, didn't get dismissed. The court case, the date keeps getting pushed. This is still ongoing. Jonathan Majors is... I'm not totally caught up on Loki, but I believe still appearing in Loki. And there's been some chances of them to maybe alter the script of Loki to make it another character. I mean, with how it works with the time travel, and you still appearing in Loki, yes, okay. Thank you for reminding me that. I wasn't 100% sure on that. Still appearing in Loki, great. So they've given themselves some chances, but haven't taken it yet because, they've already made one mistake. Disney and Marvel specifically, when they fired James Gunn. They fired James Gunn. He went across the street to DC, and then he made Suicide Squad, and now he's the new master, the new guy in charge of DC. So that is such a major misstep that it likely is going to have ripple effects in the marketplace as far as like the fight against Marvel and DC for years and years to come. So I think because of that, Marvel is probably very unlikely to pull the trigger and have a quick gut reaction to something in the way that they have in the past. So I think that's why they're kind of waiting and biding their time with Jonathan Majors. And it's that case in particular, which we haven't dug way too into, but it's very he said, she said. Very, very he said, she said. So we're going to read through some of this. This past September, a group of Marvel creatives, including studio chief Kevin Feige, assembled in Palm Springs for the studio's annual retreat. Most years, the vibe would have been confident, even cocky, given how the premier superhero brand, owned by Disney since 2009, has remade the entertainment business in its image. But this occasion was angst written, everyone at Marvel was reeling from a series of disappointments on screen, a legal scandal involving one of its biggest stars, and questions about the viability of the studio's ambitious strategy to extend the brand beyond movies into streaming. The most pressuring issues to be described at the retreat were what to do with Jonathan Majors, the actor who had been poised to carry the next phase of Marvel Cinematic Universe, but instead is headed to a high-profile trial in New York later this month on domestic violence charges. So this is the super weird part right now that they're dealing with, because Kang is supposed to be the big bad of this next phase. So it's like this is the equivalent of at the very beginning of Avengers stuff. If Josh Brolin, who played Thanos, if he had been arrested for domestic violence, this is the equivalent of that. He's supposed to be the big bad of this arc. And obviously, I think, unfortunately, it's likely that things are less planned out than they were originally. I have full faith in Kevin Feige. I think he's probably one of the greatest producers of our generation. And I'd like to think that he's going to go down in history as such. I think he has masterfully played this. I think he took a gamble on Iron Man and it paid off. I think he managed to steer the ship amazing for 10 years, which is incredible. Because again, like, it is so hard to make one good movie. Most people who make movies do not make one good movie. This guy has made so many good pictures as a producer. It's actually incredible. So I like to think that they're going to get it together. But so far, they've struggled. And it's because they haven't had that one big success. Like, they had Iron Man, and it's like, boom, we have a strategy now. Tentpole. At the top, it's Iron Man, and we're gonna build from there. So they don't have that figure right now. It was probably supposed to be Thor, moving into this new sort of space age era of Marvel. However, because it's an existing legacy character, and frankly, the Thor movies never did amazing, I think that is only going to make things more difficult for them. And I think that's probably why they've struggled quite a bit. And so far, Ragnarok was pretty good, but you go back and watch it a few times, and you're like, well, it wasn't like a good movie. It was just kind of fun and refreshing because of how blah the previous films have been. So the actor insists he is a victim. We're talking about Jonathan Majors. He is the victim, but the damage to his reputation and the chance he could lose the case has forced Marvel to reconsider its plans to center the next phase of its interlocking slate of sequels, spin-offs, and series around Majors' villainous character, Kang the Conqueror. So at the gathering in Palm Springs, executives discussed backup plans, including pivoting to another comic book adversary like Doctor Doom. That makes a lot of sense. Doctor Doom is another really great big bad. They have really not done much with Fantastic Four. I think that's one of those arrows in their quiver that they're sort of waiting to pull out. Obviously, I mean, light spoiler, I guess if you've seen friggin' Multiverse, then you know that they've dipped their toes into it, but in a very non-committal way because it was a multiversal appearance. So it was super non-committal in that casting and presentation. So, and again, you know what? I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on the Jonathan Majors thing, and I really am waiting for it to play out in court. Because I don't know. You don't know. We're going to figure it out. I'm reserving judgment. It is very he said, she said. And as we've learned very clearly from recent events over the last few years, you don't want to run to snap decisions because you never know. Making any shifts would carry its own headaches. Majors has already been a big presence in the MCU, including as scene-stealing antagonist in February's Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and he's been positioned as the franchise's next big thing in this season of Loki, particularly in the finale, which airs on November 9th, and sets up Kang as their titular character of the fifth Avengers film in 2026. He is still appearing in episodes of Loki because they've been done. They're not taking him out, but there definitely are. They've given themselves some outs, I think, naturally, that they could have taken, and they didn't take them. Okay, this is one. Quote, Marvel is truly fucked with the whole Kang angle, says one top deal maker who's seen the final Loki episode. And they haven't had an opportunity to rewrite until very recently because of the WGA strike. But I don't see a path to how they move forward with him. I don't know how much Disney is, like, hands-off with it, or if they're really hands-on because it's like we've invested a lot of money, time, and energy into making this plot work with this guy. Yeah, so Sky on TikTok, just say he isn't the real Kang. Well, that's kind of it. They have outs to get rid of him. They just haven't taken any of them. I think because they haven't had the opportunity to, with writers having been on strike, and also with like they don't want to make a snap decision. So they're waiting. They are waiting, but in their waiting, they have to keep publishing these Loki episodes as is. How long do you think they would wait for a resolution of the case before ditching it just because it takes too long? I think it's very likely that they would just keep going with it. Honestly, I don't think necessarily they would just ditch it. I think there's a good chance that as long as this is going on, they will keep him in it because they have paid him, and it would be so expensive and such a headache to change it. And frankly, Loki critically is doing fairly well, so I really don't think that they would mess that up. What their motivations for that would be null. If they changed everything and had some crazy rewrite, they risk completely screwing up Loki, and they risk burning an actor that could be completely innocent, and then that looks bad on Disney. It was a very bad look for Disney when they got rid of Johnny, and now we've had the resolution of this, and it was a bad look when they got rid of James Gunn, and then he went across the street to DC. They've had bad experiences in this category, and I think they're gonna be really careful with it. So let's keep going with this. Beyond the bad press for majors, the brain trust in Marvel is also grappling with the November release of The Marvels, a sequel to 2019's blockbuster Captain Marvel that has been plagued with lengthy reshoots and now appears likely to be underwhelmed at the box office. What does it mean for studios hiring actors in the future and avoiding problematic people, legal trouble? First DC and now Marvel. Well, how do you mean? I mean, you hire people and you do background checks, you do appropriate background checks and such, but that doesn't stop new things from happening, and that's all that happened here. New things happen. People get arrested for soliciting a prostitute. People get in bar fights. People get in accusations from the past pop up. All sorts of stuff happens. Like you don't know a lot of the time when stuff can pop up from the past. But this is something that was brand new. There's no way to account for something like this. And again, we don't know what happened, but he's having to deal with it, and Disney is having to deal with it. And they don't know how yet, but they're trying to figure it out. So, okay. So this is all an unprecedented turn of fortune for a company that has enjoyed a nearly unprecedented string of hits ever since it started independently producing the films with 2008's Iron Man. That wildly profitable run accumulated in $2.8 billion in excess of 2019's Avengers Endgame, a high watermark for the studio that has earned nearly $30 billion over 32 films. That's their coffers that they have going into the next series of this. They have lots of money to burn. Lots and lots of money to burn. So they can continue going and keep having failures because they are invested in the future of this. They know that there is a market for it. There's a built-in audience. What Marvel represents now is what we call a pre-sold franchise. It's why you see so many adaptations. It's why Transformers exists. It's why Barbie exists. It's a pre-sold franchise. It is something that not necessarily is a movie already, but has a built-in audience. So it's like the same thing for like hiring influencers to like promote stuff. It's like, you're going to get their audience as a minimum. That's all they're going for. They're going for a minimum level of guaranteed success because you're always trying to mitigate failure. And movie making is so difficult. It's so difficult. Actually, you can even apply that to like it's why Tom Cruise gets paid what Tom Cruise gets paid. It's so you can put Tom Cruise on the poster, and then you're guaranteed to make X amount of money because now you have a Tom Cruise movie. Replicating that kind of phenomenon is never easy. However, the source of Marvel's current troubles can be traced back to 2020. That's when the COVID pandemic ushered in a mandate to help boost Disney's stock price with an endless torrent of interconnecting Marvel content for the studio's fledgling streaming service Disney Plus. According to the plan, there would never be a lapse in superhero fare with either a film in theaters or a new television series streaming at any given moment. So they had a really good strategy going into it. They had a lot of money. And frankly, Disney Plus has struggled, I think, in relative to the benchmarks that they had as Marvel and as Disney. However, I think it was, I mean, when you look at it, they could not have been in a better spot for COVID. No one's going to a theater. Everyone's at home streaming stuff. And here we are with Disney launching a new streaming service. So they were poised to have the biggest streaming service of all time. They could have easily eaten Netflix's lunch, I think. But they struggled with their original content. They struggled. They had the legacy content. They have Marvel. They have Disney. They had National Geographic. They have all these legacy properties. But the problem is the new originals have been failing. And as we've learned from all of the streaming services, you're really kind of only as good as your originals because every movie, every show that you want to watch is constantly doing musical chairs with licensing. It's constantly like, Friends is on HBO, and then it's going to be on Netflix, and then it's going to be on Hulu, and then it's going to be on this. It's like you're constantly chasing your stuff around. Like, I've watched 30 Rock and Community on every platform almost, because it just keeps changing hands in licensing over the years. So you can't go like, oh, well, Netflix has like this legacy stuff, so I'm definitely going to go for that. Like, at least Disney Plus has the stuff that they hardcore own, like Star Wars, like Marvel. But they still have licensing deals with some of the other streaming services. So they don't even have that exclusively necessarily. All that being said, Disney has struggled with the originals in Marvel, and they frankly have struggled a lot with their version of Star Wars. That's all there is to it. Okay, but the ensuing tsunami of spandex proved to be too much of a good thing, and the demands for turning out so much programming taxed the Marvel apparatus. Moreover, the need to tease out an interwoven storyline over so many disparate shows, movies, and platforms created a muddled narrative that baffled viewers. Completely agree. Quote, the Marvel machine was pumping out a lot of content. Did it get to the point where it was too much and they were burning out people on superheroes? It's possible, says Wall Street analyst Eric Handler, who covers the right side of my screen. Okay, who covers Disney. The more you do, the tougher it is to maintain quality. They tried experimenting with breaking in new characters like Shang-Chi and Eternals with mixed results. With budgets as big as these, you need home runs. Yeah, you do, absolutely. It's tough, and they haven't had that one thing. Again, they haven't had that one thing where it's like, okay, now we have clear direction because we have this huge success. And we're going to build around it, like with Iron Man. They haven't had that. They've been struggling. Okay, The Marvels, which opens in theaters on November 10th, will struggle to get ball past the infield, at least by Marvel's oversized standards. The movie, which cost $250 million since he's Brie Larson reprising her role as Captain Marvel, is tracking to open $75 to $80 million, far below the $185 million Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness took in domestically in its debut weekend last year. Directed by Nia DaCosta, The Marvels reunites Larson's heroine with two superhero allies. Monica Rambeau, we saw introduced in WandaVision, and Kamala Khan. Yeah, I love Kamala Khan. I'm glad we have a Kamala Khan. Okay, then eyebrows were raised again when DaCosta began working on another film while The Marvels was still in post-production. The filmmaker moved to London earlier this year, began prepping for Tessa Thompson drama Hedda, and then they declined to comment. So yeah, if you're directing a $250 million movie, it's kind of weird for a director to leave with a few months to go, says a source familiar with the production. It's definitely weird. And it definitely speaks to, like, I mean, I'm sure they're going to get into it, but it definitely speaks to, like, they brought in somebody else to take this across the finish line, didn't they? Disney likes doing that. They kind of did it with Rogue One, and they kind of did it with Solo. They didn't like what the directors were doing with Solo and fired them because they saw it as a comedy, and the director saw it as a comedy. Disney did not see it as a comedy, and then they bailed on it. And then with Rogue One, they had to save it in editing by bringing in Tony Gilroy, I believe it was, who ended up helming the Rogue One show Andor, which I thought was great. Okay, The Marvels has seen its release date moved back twice. Once to swap places with Quantumania, which was deemed further along, and again when its debut shifted from July to November to give filmmakers more time to tinker. But the extra time didn't necessarily help. In June, Marvel, which traditionally only solicits feedback from Disney employees and their families and friends, took the uncharacteristic step of holding a public test screening in Texas. The audience gave the film middling reviews. That's an interesting step. They knew what audiences wanted, and they were able to give them more of what they for sure wanted. It was easy to do. But it's not so much anymore. So it speaks to their lack of confidence in their direction and what they're doing. And if they end up having knee-jerk reactions to public feedback, it's just going to get more muddled and more confusing, I think. Okay, but Marvel's never been in a business of being average. Quote, Kevin's real superpower, his genius has always been in post-production and getting his hands on movies and making sure that they finish strong. These days, he's spread thin. And then he declined to comment. Interesting. I mean, movies is one thing. You shoot the movie over, 90 days, maybe longer, maybe less, and then you're in post-production. And there's probably not as much stuff being pumped out. But you got to think about it. Now that it's a series, all these shows are like 45 minutes long, sometimes maybe an hour. these shows that they're putting out now for Marvel, for Star Wars, each episode is a movie. Got to think about it like that. Like they all have arcs, they have high production value, and they all need to be good and play into a narrative. So now, like Kevin Feige, instead of having to do, like, you can almost think of the Infinity Saga as a show. It had an overall arc. Each one had an arc and kind of crossed over. So now imagine blowing that up to now hundreds of episodes. Instead of like a handful of movies, it is now hundreds of episodes that all have interweaving narratives, that all have shifting timelines as far as release dates. They're being affected by strikes. They're being affected by COVID. It's going to be extremely difficult to navigate. And they're constantly, in addition to it being difficult to weave and manage in a perfect world, they are now in a situation where these things aren't landing the way that they want them to. And so it's like the worst situation you could possibly do. Honestly, DC is in a better spot because they got nothing. They are starting from square one. Absolutely. So James Gunn is doing whatever he wants. They're starting from square one. Their expectations, like the audience expectations for DC, are on the floor. So honestly, anything he does that's relatively good, if his Superman movie is good, then that's their Iron Man. That's their tentpole that they can build everything else around with confidence because the tone has been set and the figurehead has been established. So right now, DC is in a much better spot. Feige isn't the only person showing signs of strain. Marvel's entire VFX battalion, including staffers and vendors, is struggling to keep pace with the never-ending stream of productions. Again, all of these shows are very effects heavy. Very, very effects heavy. This past February, with the credits rolled with the world premiere of Quantumania, shocked ripples through the Regency Village Theater in Westwood over some shoddy CGI. Quote, there were at least 10 scenes where the visual effects had been added last minute and were out of focus. That's so bad, says one veteran power broker who was there. Quote, it was insane. I've never seen something like that in my entire career. Everyone was talking about it. Even the kids of executives were talking about it. That is rough. That is rough. The amount of VFX shots in this stuff. Like, I don't think you guys realize there's some stuff that is obviously CGI, but the amount of times that you're watching a Marvel picture and you are looking at an actor and it's not the actor, you used to be able to tell. Like you could look back at, like, I want to talk about Matrix Reloaded. There's the scenes where he's battling like 1,000 Agent Smiths, right? It's very obvious that those are all like video game engine type looking people, right? Super easy to tell. Nowadays, you should see, I'll try to find at some point some behind the scenes things, but dear God, it is the most lifelike full body scans, 3D scans. It is insane how many shots you're not looking at a real actor. It is nuts. Like, unless it's like a medium shot, dialogue, nobody's moving, or a really grounded fight scene, you're looking at a video game, basically. The amount of cars, the amount of buildings, the amount of props, the amount of everything that is just not fucking there is crazy. So it's like the VFX stuff that you're noticing, it's really, really bad. But also there's so many more things you're not noticing. That is how much work is being put on the VFX people, and that's why they're desperately unionizing. The schedule swap the Marvels had left Ant-Man sequel in a squeeze, pushing up its post-production schedule by 4.5 months. Marvel films were known for coming down to the wire, given Feige's ability to, quote, foam the runway and land the plane that way. What the fuck is foaming the runway? I gotta ask a pilot about that. Okay, says one executive familiar with how the company operates. But this level of unfinished was unprecedented and would be noted in scathing reviews, with the tentpole, the $200 million budget opened 11 days after the premiere. Critics weren't the only ones dismayed. Fed up with 14-hour delays and no overtime, Marvel VFX workers voted unanimously to unionize in September, sparking an industry-wide trend, like I was talking about. Exactly. And thank God they did. The VFX industry in general has been in such a bad position. I forget what movie it was, but there was a company that they won VFX Oscar. I think it was like 3 to 6 months after the studio had to close. They had to file for bankruptcy and everybody got laid off. So people were like, unemployed people were accepting an Oscar for their visual effect work. That is how fucked VFX work is right now. And that was an LA-based effects house. Obviously, there's a lot to be said about, how much this stuff is being outsourced to Canada. I mean, animation in general is definitely, a lot of it's in South Korea, but Canada especially, that's where a lot of the VFX work is going. Do you think we're ever going to have an Endgame level theater moment again? I don't know, man. I don't know if we're going to get it from them. I think we're going to have it with maybe other pictures. I don't see it happening with Marvel again necessarily. However, like they're far from a hit. If I had to guess, because I think DC is in such a good position, I think it's possible that we're going to get that kind of moment from DC maybe before we get it from Marvel again. Okay, the year 2023 was the straw that broke the camel's back. This former Marvel Studios VFX assistant coordinator Anna George, who appeared before the Congressional Labor Caucus on October 19th to testify about the studio's untenable deadlines and working conditions. Quote, the pay and long hours at Marvel were the reason we had to start a unionizing process there. The conditions were completely unsustainable. Disney's top brass, including newly returned CEO Bob Iger, was said to be apoplectic about Marvel's VFX troubles. 1 month after Quantumania premiered debacle, the guillotine fell on Victoria Alonso, who oversaw the studio's physical production, post-production, VFX, and animation. While the reason cited for her abrupt firing was her unauthorized role as an executive producer on the Oscar-nominated film Argentina, 1985, insiders say Disney was incensed that quality control on Marvel productions was plummeting, particularly on the ever-expanding TV front. The VFX logjam had been evident for some time, with some final effects for such Disney Plus series as WandaVision and She-Hulk Attorney at Law inserted after their streaming debuts. That Alonso was busy promoting her art house project, while Rome Byrne certainly didn't sit well with Disney leadership. Alonso's attorney said her client was unable to comment. Okay, but some internal sources suggest Alonso was a scapegoat and point to the She-Hulk VFX issues as a symptom of a deeper rot. Quote, the so-called bad VFX we see was because of half-baked scripts, says one person involved in She-Hulk. That is not Victoria, that is Kevin. And even above Kevin, those issues should be addressed in pre-production. The timeline is not allowing the Marvel executives to sit with the material. I think what they mean is that it affects the time because the scripts aren't completely solidified and they're probably constantly changing at the last minute. And so you're constantly having to redo it, and you can't sit there and do a hardcore render. You can't render things out the way you need to, and you're having to do really quick on the fly stuff. Yeah, all the while, Marvel was bleeding money, with a single episode of She-Hulk costing some $25 million, dwarfing the budget of a final season episode of HBO's Game of Thrones, but without a similar zeitgeist bang. The August 2022 series premiere at the El Capitan Theater foreshadowed what was to come 6 months later at the Quantumania bow. The She-Hulk's special effects were out of focus in multiple scenes. That is so tragic. Also, why the hell couldn't they just paint her green? Am I crazy? Am I taking crazy pills? Why couldn't they paint her green? What's so hard about that? It would have been fine. It looked so bad. How did it cost that much? It cost that much because of heavy visual effects. Probably more than any of us realize. Again, going back to how you can have shots where every single thing looks real and is not. There are things that are special effects shots that you would never even realize. There are more special effects than not special effects shots. If I had to guess on a lot of this stuff, because of even if they're in a real set and it's not all green screen or blue screen, there's large aspects of it that are scene extensions. So when we say that there's 1,000, 2,000 VFX shots in a movie, that can be small things. It's still something that a VFX house has to touch. And that takes time, takes money. And it's the reason that when you see the credits of a movie, which if you don't usually sit through, next time you see a big budget movie, I implore you, sit through the credits. You will see 20 VFX houses that have worked on the movie. And it's because they all need to be working on different aspects of it at different times, or concurrently rather. Okay, there are signs that the flood of product is leading people to tune out. Quote, I'm not prepared to call it a permanent fall, but based on the numbers that go with Marvel podcasts, Marvel-based articles, friends who do Marvel-based video coverage, all the numbers are significantly down. Oh, great. Well, this video is not going to do well. Fabulous. Thanks, Joanna Robinson, co-author of the New York Times bestseller MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios. The quality is suffering. In 2019, at the peak of if you put Marvel Studios in front of something, people would be like, oh, that brand means quality. That association is no longer the case because there have been so many projects that have felt half-baked and undercooked. Again, this is Disney's legacy now. They did this with Star Wars. They're now doing it with Marvel, very unfortunately. As public criticism mounts, Feige is pulling the plug on scripts and projects that aren't working. Case in point, the Blade reboot. I just read about this. I've heard about this a little bit. We're going to find out more about this. The Blade reboot is fucked. It is fucked. Everyone was so excited. They came out on Comic-Con. Mahershala Ali took out his hat, put on the Blade hat. Everyone was so jazzed. I love him. Fabulous actor. I'm excited for him to be Blade. The movie's fucked. Mahershala Ali signed for the eponymous role of a vampire. Things looked promising for a 2023 release date, but the project has gone through at least 5 writers, 2 directors, and 1 shutdown 6 weeks before production. One person familiar with the script, Permutation, says the story at one point morphed into a narrative led by a woman with and filled with life lessons. Blade was relegated to the 4th lead. A bizarre idea considering the studio had 2-time Oscar winner Ali on board. And the movie's called fucking Blade. There's that aspect too. I don't have a problem with the narrative being led by a woman and being filled with life lessons. But Blade being relegated to the 4th lead, are they having a problem with Mahershala Ali? It's weird. Also, real quick, I know it sounds insane that they're like, oh my God, they went through at least 5 writers. That's actually super typical. That one's actually not that big of a deal. Also, again, I implore you to stay and watch the credits of a big budget movie sometime. When you see a thing that says written by, so there can be story by credits, which means you had like a general plot you helped with, and you might actually be a producer or a director who had the idea and then gave it to a writer and said, please make this something real. And then written by credits. If you see a name, the word, if you see a name and then an ampersand and then another name, it means those 2 people wrote it together. If you see a name, the word and another name, it means they wrote it separately. This guy wrote it, and then this guy did a separate draft separate from that person, which is why you could see written by one name ampersand another name, the word and this person ampersand another person. It means 2 different teams of writers wrote that movie. What you also don't realize is that there are people living in mansions in Malibu who are writers who do not have their names on movies. It's weird how the WGA credits work, but there could be people who wrote the script in the beginning who don't have credit. There can be people who wrote a significant amount of dialogue and did a punch-up, but didn't get credit, only got money. It all depends on the deal, and it depends on WGA guidelines. Amid reports that Ali was ready to exit over script issues, Feige went back to the drawing board and hired Michael Green, the Oscar-nominated writer of Logan, to start anew. Pretty good bet. Speculation around town is that the studio is looking to make the film, now slated for 2025, on a budget of less than $100 million, a deviation from Marvel's big spending strategy. That is pennies. That is pennies. But that could be good if they want to make like a more grounded, like make it more like indie kind of feeling, and it's a lot more practical effects and stuff like that. If they wanted, it's a fucking vampire movie. It's guns and shit. You could make it on the cheap if you really wanted to. Okay, with Iger publicly acknowledging the downside of Marvel TV's glut, that quote diluted focus and attention, the keepers of the comic book empire are considering some dramatic moves. Sources said there have been talks bringing back the original gang from the Avengers movie. That is wild. They are in such a panic and can't find their footing that they're like, we got to bring them back. Oh, God. But the thing, it's like a lot of them don't want to. I don't know, like the dump truck of money they would have to pull up to get Robert Downey Jr. back, to get Captain America back. A lot of those people, I think, have no interest. They're done. They got their nut and they're good. They're outie. There's no reason for them to do it unless there's like dump truck of money. And even then, I think they would realize that they left on such a high note that any return risks muddying your reputation or the character's legacy. And you're probably best leaving on a high note, which is what they did. I don't see how they could ever convince most of the people to do it unless you never really got your due, aka Mark Ruffalo. So this would include reviving Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, never going to happen. Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, maybe, I don't know. Both of whom were killed off in Endgame. That shouldn't be a stumbling block. In comic books, beloved characters were often killed off, only to be resurrected thanks to the power of things like the multiverse. But the studio hasn't committed to the idea. If it were about to bring those actors back, it wouldn't come cheap. Sources say Downey Jr.'s upfront salary for Iron Man 3 was around $25 million. Yeah, at one point, Robert Downey Jr. was the highest paid actor of all time. Will that solve Marvel's major problem? No. That's a whole other issue. There's so many different issues that they're fucking up and need to solve. Will it solve Marvel's major problem? With Quantumania actor arrested in March, Disney executives insisted that they could afford to play a wait-and-see game given that Avengers: The Kang Dynasty wasn't expected to begin shooting until early 2024. But then Majors was dropped in quick succession by his publicists and managers. He remains a client at WME, the agency that he landed at after CAA parted ways with him pre-arrest for his brutal conduct towards staff, says one source. CAA declined to comment. In April, other domestic violence charges, other alleged domestic violence victims of Majors began cooperating with the Manhattan District Office. Then ahead of a key hearing in October, media outlets, including Variety, obtained a court filing that referenced a police incident in London involving Majors that led his ex-girlfriend to seek medical attention. Making matters even stickier. The ex-girlfriend also worked on Quantumania as a movement coach, and the London incident took place while Majors was shooting season 2 of Loki. On October 25th, the New York judge denied Majors' motion to dismiss the case, which ensures that the actor will stand trial in late November. So Jonathan Majors, CAA dropped him because of alleged brutal conduct towards staff, which honestly I hadn't even heard about. So before this got out, there's already been some issues around him, but they don't want to pull the trigger. They want to make a snap decision. So they're going to probably do everything they can to not get rid of him. But end of November, like when the season finale of Loki is coming up, so they're going to have to like play it out exactly the way that they wrote it, and then it's going to get all screwed. Studio source noted that regardless of the actor's legal issues, Marvel already being considered moving away from the Majors-led phase because of the box office performance of Quantumania, which will struggle to make a profit. Quote, it'll give people pause that given Quantumania didn't exactly land, the sources say. On October 27th, Disney removed the another Majors film, Searchlight's Magazine Dreams, from the release calendar. That makes sense. That they can afford to shelve. Okay, recasting Majors is also an option, as Feige did when he replaced Terrence Howard in Iron Man 2 with Don Cheadle. In fact, Marvel isn't afraid to change direction, even after making splashy announcements. Armor Wars was first unveiled as a series and is now being developed as a feature, while the studio's push to adapt the comic book Inhumans into a feature film generated headlines, but is now dormant. The now defunct Marvel Television mounted as Inhumans a TV series in 2017 that ran for one season on NBC. Gotcha. Still, there was one bright spot in 2023, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which became Marvel's biggest draw of the year with $845 million worldwide. The fact that it was directed by James Gunn, the guy now running rival DC Studios, was lost on no one. Exactly. That's what I've been talking about. DC is in such a strong position. James Gunn's running it. The guy who's been nailing it for Marvel. He's been nailing it at DC, and now he's running the show when expectations are on the floor. Quote, with Marvel, it used to be close to a guarantee as you could get, says Paul, oh boy, Dergarabedian. I think that's right. Dergarabedian, box office analyst at Comscore. Quote, so going all in on the budgets makes sense. Guardians 3 was a bit overlooked in how successful it was, but that had James Gunn and Chris Pratt, and I think star power is becoming more important. Then there was Quantumania with $476 million. Anything under $500 million is viewed as a disappointment. And these overreaching expectations were a result of much stress over the years. By the way, generally speaking, a movie has to make double its budget to basically break even, because of how much you spend in marketing, especially when it's a big budget movie like this. A big movie, you need to spend so much on marketing. So you basically need to make double your budget. Also, by the way, I suspect a lot of these budgets are close, but I've had a conversation with you about how 9 times out of 10, movie budgets are bullshit. You inflate the number so that you can say this is the most expensive movie of all time. Oh my God, I'm so hyped. It must be really amazing to spend so much money. Or they overspend to get an actor in like an indie darling and then say it was like a micro budget so they can have it be like film festivals and like a sleeper. It can be inflated or deflated by as much as 1,000%. That is a truth fact. Key to reinvigorating Marvel may lie with the superhero arsenal that Disney acquired during its 2019 purchase of 20th Century Fox. That deal brought several blue-chip heroes such as the X-Men and the Fantastic Four back under the studio's control. Already, fans are geeking out about the next year's Deadpool 3, which unites Ryan Reynolds' Merc with a Mouth with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and a reboot of Fantastic Four slated for 2025. As a bonus, the Fox edition gives Feige an opportunity to reimagine the X-Men franchise and very property he cut his teeth on as a young executive at Lauren Schuler Dawn's production company. Now that WGA strike is in the rearview mirror, Marvel has started looking to writers about bringing the X-Men into the MCU fold. Honestly, I think that should be their thing. I think Avengers was Avenger. You got lightning in a bottle. You're not gonna be able to get it back. If you bring them back, it's still you're gonna muddy the legacy, and you're gonna make it a whole bad taste in everyone's mouth with the great cap you put on the Infinity Saga. They need to just be like, honestly, they should have done that to begin with. As soon as they got Fox, they should have been like, okay, now the future of this is X-Men. There are a million fucking X-Men. Okay? You know, like 5. There are a million fucking X-Men that they could have do movies, do TV shows, interweaving with each other, fucking video games. There's a zillion fucking things they could do. There is no end in how many X-Men they could use. That should be the new thing. It's like it's not Avengers, it's the fucking X-Men. I don't know why they just don't do that. Maybe they will, who knows? But right now they're still trying to coast on like the residual hype of the Infinity Saga. And they're trying to ride, like the wave crested, it broke, it hit, and now they're riding the wake back to the shore. Once they get to the shore, they're going to have to figure out what to do next. They're waiting for the next wave to come before they can get to the shore, but I think they're going to hit sand. While Feige recalibrates, the rest of the industry is anxiously hoping that Marvel's best days are not behind it. Quote, writing a Marvel obituary would be ill-advised, says Jason Squire, professor emeritus. How do you say that? Anyways, USC School of Cinema Arts. Good school. And host of the Movie Business Podcast. Kevin Feige is the Babe Ruth of movie executives, and Marvel has the most profitable track record in movie history, no question. To summarize, they're fucked. There's too many irons in the fire right now as well. Like they can't ditch any of this stuff. They're way too invested. Loki's gonna end season 2. I'm sure it's gonna get a season 3 because it's doing fairly well, as far as I understand. Fairly well. I don't know if anything else is gonna continue. The movies, it's almost like with DC right now. There's this residual stuff that they already have that they don't really care that much about because they just it's part of maybe an old strategy. It's like with The Flash coming out. It's like they needed that as kind of a palate cleanser, but also Aquaman 2 is still coming out. Like that doesn't have anything to do with anything now. That DC is dead. But the movie's done, and it'll make X amount of money, and it's worth more to put it out and make what they make than it is to take the tax write-off like they did with Batgirl. So they're gonna keep putting this stuff out. They're gonna keep steaming ahead for a lot of this stuff, but at the same time, there's enough that hasn't shot yet because of the SAG strike that I think they might be able to use this time to establish a new strategy because they still have their producers. And they're the ones who are ultimately going to be like, okay, this is like Kevin Feige is the executive producer. He's the one who's going to be like, this is our arc for the next 10 years. This is what we're doing. I mean, it's supposed to be Kang in some way, but I can't see the end exactly. Yeah, if they have to get rid of Kang, there's a very good chance they're going to recast it. The problem is the difference with recasting someone like Kang and someone like Terrence Howard from Iron Man. Terrence Howard from Iron Man, that character Rhodey, is like the buddy of the main guy. He's the little buddy. He's the little buddy of the group. He's not the fucking main bad guy. Personally, I like the idea of Doctor Doom because in my opinion, they have done a piss poor job establishing that Kang is going to be this overarching bad guy. He's in Loki, sure. He was in Quantumania, sure. Nobody left Quantumania. Forget about Quantumania. It's not a thing. Forget about Loki. Loki is Loki, and it's great. I think they are totally still in a position where they could make it Doctor Doom.